All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Millennials Are Old podcast. And you know what, Brian? I've been thinking right. Of course, we live in this great year of 2026. Many people have said this is the most disease-free year of all time. Would you agree with that, Brian?
Yeah, it's been disease free. It's really been prosperous. I think we're all thriving both on a personal level as well as a wider society. I certainly know that every day I get up, I feel very proud of where I'm at, but also just the way that the great modern American society that I am one small cog in gets to continue chugging along. It's constant growth. I never feel disoriented. It's the best. I think it's going to keep getting better.
No, absolutely. And, of course, we have the Make America Healthy Again movement, which is doing very well. Of course, they took they put beef tallow back into the fries at fucking Shakey's or whatever. Shit's going fucking great right now. But I wanted to cover something that we haven't talked about in a while, which is the Resident Evil franchise, aka one of the most diseased video game franchise ever. Make America Unhealthy Again, which I think was James Marcus fucking Spencer and all the other villains of Resident Evil's opinion.
An unsettlingly prescient series. Maybe not in the most obvious ways, in fact.
No, absolutely. So I think for this week, we should cover the first half of the 2000s decade of the Resident Evil games, because there's many, many games in this franchise after 1999, and there's no way we can cover all 10 years of them in one single episode. So we're going to do the first 5 years of the 2000s. So Resident Evil games from 2000 to 2005. So let's get into it. But before we get into it, Brian, let's bring back our segment, Cruise Generation, Cruise Millennium Moment of the Week.
Oh, no.
We.
Another one? Week.
Woo! Yeah! All right.
And I'm coming in blind.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, Brian, I did say we were going to cover Keir Starmer's resignation, which is also very hilarious. But one I think is actually even funnier, which is something I just learned about today, even though it's obvious this is going to happen. But Brian, for this week, because this will come out after the event is over, but man, I really want to talk about the absolute fucking disaster that is the Great American State Fair. Have you heard anything about this?
No, I have not, actually. I think I have tangentially and a little bit, like you've alluded it to me, but no, it's not a thing I've been following at all. I don't think I've ever been to a state fair, in fact.
Oh, no, it's definitely not the state fair that many people in the Midwest have been to, including our home state of Wisconsin, which actually is the 8th largest state fair in America. A lot of people don't know that. But this Great American State Fair is turning into an absolute fucking dud. This is part of Trump's 250th anniversary of America, the semi-quincentennial, so 250th of America. And just how much of a
that's right. Egyptian
Lover
is playing there. Egyptian Lover and Coops Danica of 3-6 Mafia at least is playing. I think they only got Coops Danica. Baby Boo. It's weird the cheese on the bill.
Yeah, no, it is an absolute fucking disaster. And I saw footage today of, I think this is either the first or one of the first days of the Great American State Fair. And no kidding, Brian, there was like 20 people that showed up to it at the National Mall. And I went to the National Mall last year, and I can tell you what, on a regular April day when we went to DC, there was, I'm going to say conservatively, thousands of people. It wasn't even
people were actively avoiding running their shopping errands at the mall today.
Well, no. The National Mall that's the thing with the green space. It goes from like the U.S. Congressional House all the way to the Lincoln Memorial. It's not like a shopping mall.
But people were like avoiding it, right? People were avoiding that portion of.
Oh, absolutely, were avoiding
people that otherwise wouldn't have.
Absolutely. Like, I'm not even joking. In the video that they sent of the green space of the National Mall, which it goes on for like a half a fucking mile, there's like 20 people there. There's like nobody fucking there at all. It's hilarious. And there's like one guy who's like singing a country song, and there's an American flag and an Israel flag in the background, and there's like two people there. It's hilarious.
This is so humiliating. Trump is evil. He's a stupid piece of shit. I wish bad things upon him and his whole cabinet and all that. That aside, if you were expecting a modern president that was going to put on a glitzy, fabulous, crowd-pleasing, populist, big, dumb festival that was going to be able to read that, at least that most like libidinal part of like the American base, and go, I'm going to give you hugs, the slop you want, and it's going to be fun and great, and everyone's going to fucking show up to it. Who you would think it would be Trump, right? Like, I would say, let's go through the last 5 presidents. Who's the one most likely to put on a great music festival? Well, probably Obama. But right behind that is Donald Trump. The Bushes, the Clintons, and Reagans are all a distant third. Trump not being able to like like pull this together or to hire people to pull it together is extremely damaging to his brand, for me at least.
No, absolutely. Even the Biden inauguration had more fucking juice than this thing. Like, that's how
It
low
had New
effort and low
Radicals.
key this is. Yeah, they had New Radicals come back to perform their one major hit in, I think, what, in memory of Beau Biden. That had more energy than this fucking bullshit.
Aw.
That's how bad this is.
The fake CNC Music Factory. You can go see the rapper from CNC Music Factory who actually wasn't a member of the group and didn't write anything.
You can hear the guy who did Bust a Move. The guy who did Bust a Move
Yeah.
was supposed to fucking play there. Vanilla Ice was supposed to play there. Like, yeah, you can see all the hits from the 90s. By the way, bands that would be wash-ups at fucking Summerfest in Milwaukee. Like, that is how fucking low effort this shit is. A music festival you can go to for $35 for adults and $22 for seniors has more juice than America's 250th anniversary Great American State Fair. Like, embarrassingly fucking pathetic.
So I do need to say something that I was thinking about earlier this week regarding Vanilla Ice being one of the last acts to like turn up, right? People were dropping off left and right, and Ice didn't. It's shocking to me that he didn't have the media instinct to at some point when everyone else was dropping off, we push back on this whole thing that art is good based on its politics, or that you have to, you have to like art that supports your politics, or even that it matters if artists publicly reflect your personal politics. I think we both have complicated feelings on that, and we both lean towards it not being the most important thing in the world. But if I'm Vanilla Ice, I see the way the wind is going on this. If he was really savvy, he would have said it as soon as they offered it. You see the way the wind is blowing, and you make a corny, ham-fisted public statement. I, Vanilla Ice, I know that there have been a lot of criticisms about the spaces that I take up in Black culture. I know that there's a complicated relationship between the music I make, who I make it for, and who originally made that music. And while he says something like, well, I firmly believe that contributing hip-hop and its culture. And then you say, you don't even have to get too political. I'm saying he needed to do some CRT thing. But he says, and just because of the questions that raised, I want to step away from this because I feel that it aligns me and my contributions to hip-hop, however, disputed they may be, with this administration. And I'm not saying that that would have been good to do. It would have been corny and stupid, but it would have done boffo for Ice, man.
Well, not only that, but it's not like he needs the fucking money. And of course, Trump's not gonna fucking pay these people more than $5 to show up anyways. But talk about, people talk about fucking how washed up Vanilla Ice is, but he's worth probably tens of millions of dollars. He's doing financially just fucking fine. He's a pop culture gadfly since fucking The Surreal Life on VH1 or whatever. He has consistently had work doing shit in media. He's not somebody who has not only no media training, but he's also somebody who still has some staying power as some niche celebrity, but he's worth, like I said, at least tens of millions of dollars. Yeah. He doesn't have to do anything to stay in the spotlight this desperately. He doesn't have to do state fair level bullshit. He really doesn't.
I don't think he ever stopped. I think he's continuously put out records. Just, I hate to say for the craft. Just wait till I tell you my R. Kelly rehabilitation project.
Well, talk about people who keep releasing discs regardless of quality. I think it leads perfectly back into our subject, which is once again the 2000s, the first half of the decade, 2000s Resident Evil games. So, we covered the original the original PlayStation trilogy in the first episode because that was the only games released in the 90s for Resident Evil, shockingly. But now we're going to get into some great games, but holy shit, some real fucking stinkers here. So, the first game of the Resident Evil franchise released in the new millennium, believe it or not, is Resident Evil Gun Survivor, aka still to this day one of the worst Resident Evil games and an infamous bomb. Now, Brian, did you ever play Resident Evil Survivor?
The only reason that I know that Gun Survivor exists is because you are my friend and you have told me about this game. It is not a game I've ever encountered in all of my times on something off of forums or anywhere or in lurking any sort of pop culture discussion or, and I've always been a fan of gaming history, retrospectives. I've never fucking seen anyone talk about this game. And that is, for me, illustrative of what this episode's going to be like, because the first era of Resident Evil, I have a pretty good handle on. Me and my brother had all those games. We played them quite a bit. Once you get into this era, I have a couple of very prominent experiences, but largely this is a black hole for me. What the fuck is Gun Survivor? What kind of phrase is that? What kind of mistranslation is that?
So Resident Evil Gun Survivor was originally a light gun game that was released in Japan. It originally was supposed to be a light gun game, but due to Columbine, it got limited to just controller. So the way you were actually supposed to play it was totally gimped in the American release. It has the worst Resident Evil dialogue of any Resident Evil game, and that's fucking saying something, because those games, especially early on, were never known for their great dialogue. It's horrible. The story is garbage. The gameplay gameplay's terrible. It's both way too hard and also way too easy at the same time. The storyline is so fucking campy that, like, it's something that you'd see in, like, a fucking soap opera. It's like Resident Evil soap opera. It's that fucking bad.
So, first of all, I think we talked a little bit about a similar thing or a related thing in our Video Nasties series back in the day, right? This shows how abstract anti-violence censorship in media is. Because national tragedy, everyone loses their mind about music or movies or thinking about just about everything that they can do except for talking to their kids, right? The solution in the case of this game is it's got a light gun feature. Well, that's no bueno because, that you're handing kids a gun, and the leap from a plastic electronic toy gun to a real gun is not that far, apparently, but the actual content of the game doesn't change, right? So
Yeah.
it's kind of like, and I'm not saying it should have changed, but the game is what it is. It involves violence and killing zombies.
Oh, no, absolutely. And, this actually goes back to a little bit of my childhood, too, because, I love my mom. She's a genuinely fantastic mom, but some of her censorship things were also fucking hilarious. Like, for example, my mom would let me play all the Mortal Kombat games I wanted, but she wouldn't let me see the movie, which is hilarious because the original Mortal Kombat movie is...
The games are so much more raw.
So much more raw. And another one is that she would basically let me eat almost anything I wanted when it came to candy and, whatever, in moderation. I mean, I ended up being a really fat kid growing up, but, within moderation to a certain extent, you know what I mean? Like, she wasn't, like, too much of it. But, like, she wouldn't let me have Lemonheads because she was afraid I'd choke on them. But she let me eat anything else, but just not Lemonheads.
They dissolve.
Yeah, exactly. Because she had heard a story about a kid who ate a Lemonhead, but, like, threw it up in the air and it got caught in his
that was probably
throat.
A 2-year-old or, like, a 1-year-old.
Yeah, exactly. It was so funny. To be fair, that's very mild for, like, boomer, like, censorship of children. It's extremely mild.
And then I have a follow-up question related to the light gun. Obviously, getting rid of the light gun feature, I don't have to play the game to know that's going to kill probably the main gimmick. At this time, a light gun feature, this is 99 to 2000, I guess, right? This is the very beginning of the new century. That's still a pretty novel feature, pretty cool, pretty fun. You get rid of that, and I guess that's what I have to ask you. Is this game substantially better with the light gun, or is it substantially worse without it? Because to me, it seems just at a glance right now, based on combining what I'm seeing, just glancing, and what you're telling me, it seems like a pretty unremarkable installment to the series. And it seems like once you get rid of the light gun, it really, really loses whatever it has to make it stand out.
I would agree with that, yes. Like, obviously, the light gun helped it, but it's still a very mediocre, at best, game with the light gun, and taking away one of its core features just makes the game infinitely fucking worse. And I have that game. I have every Resident Evil game on physical disc that was released in this era, and the vast majority of them I have physical copies of. And I think I got it was $10, but nowadays it's one of those holy grail games for the PS1. Like, it's just very hard to find. But I played it quite a few times on the PS1, on my PS2, because of course the PS2 had backwards compatibility. And man, that cursor on the controller is just bad. And there's no way to toggle it from what I remember. It's just so slow and it's shitty. And, you can shoot the zombie anywhere. It does the same amount of fucking damage. So it doesn't matter if you give it a headshot or anything. So it's just a bad game. It's just objectively a fucking terrible game. And like I said, it was the very first Resident Evil game to get the distinction of, like, just dog shit tier. And next one after that is Resident Evil Code Veronica, which is one of the more controversial Resident Evil games. I told you off air after the recording of our last episode, I think it's awful, but for whatever reason, people really like it. I just don't know why. I know this was one that you had an experience with, one of the few that we're going to cover. Yeah. And you remember not liking it very much, as you told me. I don't understand why people don't like it, or like it. I just think it's a bad game. It's bad voice acting, bad controls. It's way too fucking hard. There's no difficulty settings, so there's no way to make it any better. And the post-game content is just not very good. It's crazy that people like it.
So my recollection of this game, which I would have played it for probably 2000 to early 2002 or whatever, right? So I got this from my brother as a present right when it came out. As I said, he had the previous games. Me and my brother played the core Resident Evil games up to that point a lot. We really enjoyed them. And I think that if I'd been older, I was literally like a little kid. This is 2000. I was probably 8, maybe 7 even. I'm just seeing in probably Tips and Tricks. That's what I was subscribed to. That's what we got at my house for video games. I'm seeing, a Resident Evil game. Now, if I was a little older, I probably would have seen the telltale signs, the hints that this is a filler game and not like a main installment. But when you're that young, you don't know. And I tell my mom, we should get this game for Brad. Me and him can play it together. It's going to be really fun and really scary. And my mom goes out and buys it. Because there was a period of time where it was like, I liked scary things, but I was too scared to play Resident Evil alone, so my brother would play it with me. It was that type of deal. So it's like a thing we did. We get this game, and brother's playing it, and we're taking turns, and, he's about 8 years older than me, so he's kind of showing me how to play it. And I'm thinking, this isn't as good as the other games. But I don't have, I'm like 7, so I don't have a way to articulate that. I know that it basically plays the same as the previous Resident Evil games. The mechanics are largely similar on their face. Basically, a Resident Evil game, just in what's happening. It's a survival horror game, and I know that it's not as good, that I don't want to keep playing it. Me and my brother take the game out after having it for about a week, and Brad says, like, hey, it's really cool that you thought to get this game for me. That's really nice. It's very thoughtful. It's cool that we're doing this together. And he said, I don't think this game's very good. And I kind of remember being like, yeah, it's not, right? And now, at the time, I was just like, well, I guess Resident Evil is bad now. Get a little bit old, and you kind of go like, oh, it's because it wasn't a main series. Tossed off and whatever. Now, revisiting it this week, because I haven't played it since then. Once we took it out of that PlayStation, and we revisited it a couple times over the next couple of years, I don't think we ever played it again. PlayStation, I keep saying PlayStation, we had it for the Dreamcast, actually, which may actually be a factor in why it wasn't very good.
Well, interestingly enough, you talked about it being a side game. Code Veronica was actually designed originally to be a main series game. It was originally supposed to be Resident Evil 3, but due to a licensing issue with PlayStation, you couldn't release a mainstay game on anything other than the PlayStation at the time. So Code Veronica was actually meant to be Resident Evil 3. So that's why it's a continuation of Resident Evil 2, and that's why Resident Evil 3 is actually more seemingly a side game, because it takes place just slightly before, after, and kind of in the middle of Resident Evil 2. But at the same time, I think your point still stands. It still feels like a side game because it just isn't very good. And like I said, for whatever reason, Resident Evil fans love this game. And like I said, it just makes no sense. I think people are blinded by nostalgia because it is just objectively not a good game. And another thing I think I mentioned on the original Resident Evil episode was that the thing is that it is by far the worst Resident Evil game when it comes to soft locking. There's like 3 different instances where if you don't do the exact thing that the game wants you to do and it never gives you an indication to do it that way, you just can't proceed. And there's so many of them. Like I said, there's at least 3.
Side game shit
Just ruins the entire fucking game because you have to restart the entire game again. And one of them is like when you're like 90% through the fucking game. So it's just badly designed. It's just a badly designed, crappy game. And that's the most recent game to get an official remake announcement. And I'm like, fuck yeah, finally. A good version of this fucking trash game. I'm excited about it, really.
In doing some research to refresh my memory, one of the things that I saw that I do think is potentially compelling, and it kind of makes me want to revisit the game, or at least maybe watch some playthroughs evidency, is I wouldn't have caught at that age, I think, the change in settings, the kind of the gothic Victorian angle that they were trying to pivot towards with Veronica. But the idea, and to my knowledge, there has not been a Resident Evil game with that specific Victorian gothic horror vibe since this. So as far as I'm aware, this is really the only RE game that really does that.
Resident Evil 8 kind of has that too, actually.
Interesting.
But it takes place in Romania, I think, if I'm not mistaken. But it has some like Victorian sort of like gothic horror elements to it. Not every portion of the game, but I would say it actually has quite a bit. But I think your point still stands. They didn't come back to this for like 15 plus fucking years.
So that to me, as a horror fan, and I do like a lot of gothic horror films and things, I like that aesthetic, I like gothic horror literature. When I see that now that I'm much older, I do think like, oh, that actually is kind of compelling. Maybe that's what's sticking with people who played this game, because it would have really stood out in the franchise for a very long time.
No, absolutely. And there are some good story elements. I won't disagree with that, but I don't think it makes up for the faults in basically every element of its gameplay, if I'm being honest. But, the next game, talk about Code Veronica. Next game in here is Resident Evil Gun Survivor 2 Code Veronica. Now, I am one of maybe 0.1% of Resident Evil fans who've actually played this game because it was released exclusively in Japan for the arcades, I believe, and exclusively in Japan and Europe for the home consoles. It was never released in America. In fact, the only reason I've ever been able to play this game in a physical form is because there is a physical arcade cabinet of it at my favorite arcade, Galloping Ghost in Brookfield, Illinois. And I played this game quite a few times, and it is definitely better than the original Gun Survivor, but it is still a bad game. It is still a pretty terrible game. The gameplay is just so much more fast-paced. It's extremely arcadey, whereas Survivor's kind of trying to be like a narrative Resident Evil game, but it's also trying to be arcadey and failing at both. Whereas this game's very arcadey. It's fun in that way. Like, it's a game you could beat in like 15 fucking minutes, if that.
Is it like House of the Dead?
Yep, it's very House of the Dead, but the thing is that you actually can move your character, but it's very awkward because it is of course, course, light gun peripheral, but you actually use, this is so ridiculous, but you actually move the character using the gun. It's on like a track and you have to like move it up and down while shooting. So you're just like fucking going ape shit, going like, ah! It's like in an action movie where a guy's just like shooting a gun, just going in circles, going, ah! Like Arnold in a movie or something. And you're just going, ah! Blowing fucking zombies and Nemesis and all the monsters in Code Veronica up. It's actually, in my opinion, the actual real way to play Code Veronica because the setting is Code Veronica, which I know is absolutely a nuclear take, but this is my opinion. The best way to play Code Veronica is Gun Survivor 2. If you can find a copy of it, which once again, if you're outside of Europe and Japan is basically impossible. But once again, if you're in the Chicago area or just driving through whatever, go to Galloping Ghost Arcade in Brookfield, Illinois. Still the best arcade in the fucking world. I've been there like a dozen fucking times. I've met many of the Mortal Kombat actors there. The guy who owns it's a nice guy. I'm friends with him on Facebook. It's a cool fucking place. Go to it. And they have a dedicated Gun Survivor 2 cabinet. And it is a lot of fucking fun. It's a bad game, but it's a lot of fucking fun. I won't deny that. The next one here is Resident Evil Gaiden. Now, this is a Game Boy Color game. It is a top-down role-playing game, fucking Resident Evil. That's what this is.
Is it good? Because those
No,
are the
it's
types of
terrible.
games I like.
The first 4 games that came out in this decade, they're all bad. Now, this is another game that's not canon, unlike Code Veronica, which is canon, but of course, Gun Survivor and Gun Survivor 2 aren't canon, but this game is also not canon, but it takes place on a boat, and you play as Leon Kennedy and Barry Burton, so of course, 2 great characters from the early Resident Evil games, and you basically have to figure out, once again, as you can imagine, a viral outbreak on a boat, and yeah, the gameplay is fucking terrible. It is a role-playing, top-down Resident Evil game on the Game Boy Color, so it can only be as good as that sounds, which it doesn't sound very fucking good as you can imagine. It's kind of trash. You know, it's another one of the games that you can soft lock like 20 fucking times. Like, it is just a bad game, and I have it on Game Boy Color.
Why do they do that so much?
I think it's just a oversight of early game design. It really is. Like, I don't think they ever meant to do it, but at the same time, like, this game is just, yeah, very bad. And I do have it once again on Game Boy Color. It's also another holy grail game. Like, if I were to sell this, I could probably get $100 fucking for it, but I think I paid like $20 for it or some shit. I don't even remember, but I do have it. And yeah, not good. Another big stinker. And then the next one here is, and finally we're getting good. Finally some good shit, is the Resident Evil remake. Now, this is the game that really saved Resident Evil from just being more shovelware garbage, in my opinion. This is still to this day my second favorite video game ever and my favorite, or second favorite Resident Evil game. It is fucking phenomenal. It does everything that the original does, but even better. It adds more stuff. It takes away basically nothing. I think the only thing it takes away is like literally, I looked up a YouTube video before this. There's like one room that they decided to cut. But otherwise that, it adds literally everything else. It adds better graphics, obviously. It adds better voice acting. It adds an entire different antagonist, which is one of the best antagonists in the entire Resident Evil franchise, with Lisa Trevor as one of the antagonists, one of the side boss characters. Just fucking phenomenal. There is literally nothing bad about this game, and it still to this day is one of the scariest Resident Evil games. It will make you fucking shit yourself if you're like 12 years old and playing this for the first time. Like, I remember when I first played this game, I could only get to like 3 rooms and I had to stop, and I eventually built up the courage to keep going. That's how fucking scary this game was for me when I was like 14 years old.
This is an interesting example of something that I've thought about before, about differences in media. We've said before, when you remake a film or even when you record a cover of a song, there's no way that it will replace the original, right? It's a separate entity. I think that could be true in video games, but what we largely find is that it's not. In video games, and I think this tracks through even when you look at like a completely different genre, a completely different platform. Look at Super Mario Brothers Deluxe for the Game Boy Color. A remake of a classic video game, if it's done well, will essentially replace the original. And that's not necessarily bad in the way that I think it would be bad if a remake of a film made in the 90s replaced the version made in the 40s or whatever. I think that would be a cultural loss. What you see with a good video game remake, though, is that you can take these things and go like, oh, this is like a classic game. It's actually kind of historically important, but there's fundamental things with it that don't really work that we can make infinitely better now. Ever since this remake has come out, even before that, I don't really know anyone that talked about the original Resident Evil. I feel like already when Resident Evil 2 came out, a lot of people treat that as the definitive game up to this point. When the Resident Evil remake came out, I remember playing it with my brother. This is a bit later. I'm a bit older now, and just thinking, this is so much better. It's like playing, I don't want to say it's like playing a different game, because it's not, but it's kind of like you're playing the skin of the same game, but there's so much more like possibility to it. You know, it's everything that's in that first game refined, and not in a way that is gimmicky, not in a way that's like really modern. They didn't add a bunch of quick time events or something like that. They just kind of make it work in a cinematic and storytelling way, in a way way that the first one just probably didn't have the capacity to.
No, I 100% agree with that. It is an improvement, like I said, in the original in basically every way. There's really no reason to play the original game after this one, which I usually don't say about like remakes of almost any kind. I think there's still like utility, but like it's one of the few remakes I've ever played that there's really not a reason to go back unless you want to do it for historic or archival reasons, because this game is just so fucking incredible. Like it literally improves the original game in every single way. And we talked about the original plot of the original Resident Evil in the original episode that we covered through this, so I'm not going to go over the story beats, but I do want to go real quick into Code Veronica because I completely skipped over Code Veronica. I'm only going to talk about the games that are actually canon for story real quick. So it takes place right after Resident Evil 2/3. There are, of course, Claire Redfield, and you can also play as Chris later on, and you're basically stuck on this French island that Umbrella owns. You get kidnapped by Umbrella and you have to make it through. You eventually team up back with your brother. There's a really annoying character named Steve who's still one of the most annoying characters of video game history. I was so happy when he fucking died at the end. And you have to figure out basically the, once again, overall disease history and mystery when it comes to both this French island, and eventually you make your way to fucking Antarctica, which is also fucking hilarious. But it is the first game since the original to feature Wesker again. So it's, proven that Wesker is still alive. So I don't want to get too much into the plot otherwise of Code Veronica because I actually don't want to spoil it, because the plot is actually really good. But other than that, the plot of that game is just complete fucking, or everything else about that game is just complete fucking garbage. But, once again, the original Resident Evil remake, I should say, we covered the original plot of the original Resident Evil, so really nothing changes outside of a few added features, but it just improves upon it. So I don't want to get into the story too much, but one game I really want to get into the story of is the next game released in the Resident Evil franchise, which is Resident Evil Zero. Now, this is a very interesting game. This game was actually originally made on the N64. That was the original version of it. There is a very short demo version that was shown off at like the Tokyo Game Expo, I think, or something. E3, something along those lines, that shows the original N64 footage, but of course, it was made in like 2000, so they're like, shit, let's just put it on the next console or whatever. And this is another very controversial entry in the Resident Evil franchise. I actually really like this game. I think it's really interesting. It's a prequel to the original Resident Evil, which makes sense with Resident Evil Zero. I personally think that the storyline of this game is very interesting. It shows some of the pre-stuff in there. It also shows some, familiar locations in other Resident Evil games. That's really cool to see. It features a great side character named Billy Cohen, who's the other playable character because it's actually a co-op game. Local co-op with yourself. It is a solo game, but it's a game where you can tag team between Rebecca Chambers, who was in the original Resident Evil, and Billy Cohen. And you just have to go to another mansion that was occupied and created by another creator of the Umbrella Corporation. And, there's some shitty elements of it, I won't lie, but other than that, I think it's a great fucking game. And I think it's really unfortunate that fans generally don't like this game, because I actually think it's really fucking good.
So with everything that you're saying, this seems like, given the state of the franchise at this point, like a pretty solid entry. Why would you say the fan base has such a kind of divided attitude on it, or it's so unpopular?
So there's a couple good reasons, I do think. And to be fair, these are the criticisms I have with the game too. So the storyline, even though it is a prequel, is a little bit inconsistent with the later storyline of the original Resident Evil, because one of the characters, Rebecca Chambers, is a character in the original Resident Evil. And in that game, she is very timid. She's very new. I mean, in the game universe, she's 18 and she's part of the STARS Bravo team, which, to be fair, why would an 18-year-old be allowed to be on a specialty fucking military organization that's part of the local police department? Why would an 18-year-old be part of that? But, whatever. But either way, in that game, she's very timid. She's very young. She's very rookie. But in this game, like, she basically just, for lack of a better word, fucking nuts up, and she is very strong and takes on a lot of enemies. So in this game, she does, but then in the immediate aftermath, because the original Resident Evil takes place immediately after this game,
right,
it just doesn't make any sense, which I do agree with story-wise. Some people don't like Billy Cohen as a character, although I personally think he's great, and he generally is liked by the fan base, but he's never shown up again in the Resident Evil franchise, unfortunately. He's interesting because he's a former soldier who is basically, set up as a patsy because his military unit committed a war crime in Africa. It's very interesting. And the storyline of this game is basically that they are there to investigate the escape of Billy Cohen because he's set for execution, but his caravan is attacked by zombies in the middle of the night. And so he, quote unquote, escapes. But you later learn that he was once again the patsy for this military unit that he was in that committed a war crime that he tried to stop. Very similar to the trial of Billy Jack. Yep, exactly. In fact, that scene is almost the exact same as in the trial of Billy Jack. Like, no joke. It's awesome. It really is like, fucking My Lai Massacre / trial of Billy Jack scene. It's great. It's also also, just like with the Resident Evil remake, it's a beautiful game. But I would say the ultimate problem that people have with this game is the gameplay is different. They try to do different things, but it doesn't quite work well. It's not as bad as like the Gun Survivor games or fucking Gaiden, but it's just not great. Like, for example, this is the first Resident Evil game in the like actual console games that skipped over, I should say the like main story, like fucking console games that skipped over having the item box where you just drop items. But the problem is there's many items that you need to reuse multiple times, but there's only like one of them. So you drop them in like one section that's like half the world away. So you have to like spend 20 minutes backtracking to like find the specific item. And people who play this game know exactly which item I'm talking about. It's the fucking hook shot. You have to use it multiple times, and you use it in the train section at the very beginning. You think you never have to use it again, and you have to use it like 3 more times after that. It's so fucking irritating. So I actually played a mod that was on Nexus Mods for the PC that gets rid of the dropping. So you just use the typewriter as both the item box and the save, and it works phenomenal. It works so fucking well. I wish they did that for the original game. It really fixes that problem, but that's another thing that people really don't like about this game, and I do understand. And some people complain it's very hard. I don't think that's really much of a problem because there's multiple difficulty settings, and I don't think the game's really that difficult, to be honest. Unlike Code Veronica, that is extremely difficult and unfair. There's not even really any like soft locking issues that I can remember, so those are the main problems that people have with this game. And I understand why people would not like it for some of the reasons, but I think it's actually generally a pretty good game. Like I said, very beautiful, great music, storyline's good, it has a great side character that unfortunately they never brought back. My guess is that he probably died, because not only is he a death row inmate, but he's also stuck in Raccoon City during the incident, so my guess is that he probably fucking died. That's
he's getting it from all sides.
Oh, absolutely. Like, there's really no way for him to leave. He also has extremely distinctive tattoos, so that would get him caught immediately. Like, he is absolutely on the FBI's most fucking wanted. There's no way he'd be able to escape to anywhere. He'd get caught almost immediately the second that he's in fucking public. Like, just being serious. And he's stuck in the Arklay Mountains during the fucking mansion incident. Both mansion incidents. There's no way he survived. But at the same time, you know, at least he got to die, at least not getting fucking lethal injection or gas chamber, so that's something, I guess.
Has anyone ever postulated about that? Like any sort of like, where did he end up sort of things?
Oh, absolutely. He is absolutely one of the great like mysteries of the Resident Evil franchise. Like on the forums, like people are like, oh, I miss Billy Cohen. Let's bring back Billy Cohen or whatever. And like, don't get me wrong. I would love to see Billy Cohen come back as a character, but like, he's fucking dead. That's just the reality. And like I said, I'm glad that he was able to go out kind of more on his own terms than, yeah, like a lethal injection or fucking like gas chamber, but he's just fucking dead. And it just is what it is. Almost everybody died in the zombie apocalypse. He's just one more of the over 100,000 people that died in the Raccoon City incident. So, I mean, it is what it is. As tragic as that is.
It's funny that, like, it seems like you like this character. This is probably a pretty well beloved character within the community, but that people are holding on. And as you said, it's like, well, there's pretty much every reason to just believe that Billy died.
Oh, yeah, especially if you've never seen him in a file or never seen him mentioned or whatever. There's like no way he lived. He looks very distinctive. He has incredibly distinctive tattoos. He's dead. He's just as fucking dead. And real quick storyline. So once again, it takes place just very briefly before the original Resident Evil game. You play as Rebecca Chambers and Billy Cohen. Eventually, you make it to another mansion that was created by James Marcus, very close by to the Spencer mansion. James Marcus, he's the ultimate bad guy. He was revived with this leech parasite that was like a not quite T virus level because it was basically stuck in this facility, but the body of James Marcus after Wesker and Birkin. So Birkin and Wesker both had James Marcus killed, and his body is reanimated with the leech, and over many, many years it reanimates to not only have him be his younger self, but also him be functionally immortal, and that's ultimately the bad guy you have to face at the very end. It's a giant leech monster you have to kill. It's a great ending sequence, as many of the great Resident Evil ending sequences are. And then, yeah, Rebecca gets stuck in the Spencer mansion, and Billy is never seen again, and that's the end of that story. But overall, like I said, I do like this game quite a bit. I replayed it maybe 2 months ago, and I think it still holds up pretty well. It's a really, really good game. And then the next entry here is Resident Evil Dead Aim. Now, this is the final light gun game in the early 2000s, and this is the one that finally did it well. Like, this is actually a really solid game. It's not amazing, it's fine, but it's certainly better than Gun Survivor 1 and 2. That is for goddamn sure. In fact, I think in Japan this was called Resident Evil Gun Survivor Dead Aim, if I'm not mistaken, but it's not called that in America. It's just called Resident Evil Dead Aim. And this game is not canon, but I'm going to get into just the storyline real quick. So it takes place on a boat. There's some guy who's just a Leon Kennedy knockoff, and eventually he teams up with an Ada Wong knockoff. They're both knockoffs of Leon Kennedy and Ada Wong. And I'm not just saying that because one is like a generic white guy and the other is a generic Asian spy. That's just objectively what they are. They're just poor renditions of both Leon and Ada. That's just the fuck they are. And eventually in this boat, you come across a villain who is a transsexual electric zombie monster, which is interesting.
I mean, that's kind of awesome, though.
I mean, there are two characters in this fucking retrospective we're talking about that feature transsexual villains. Because Code Veronica, the final enemy, is, oh my god, I can't remember once again, but it's the descendant of one of the Umbrella founders. Their son cosplays as the sister in that fucking game. I don't think it's quite transsexual. It's kind of more of like a like Norman Bates and Norman Bates' mom thing than like actual transsexualism or like, you know, Dress to Kill by Brian De Palma. It's very much like Dress to Kill with Brian De Palma. It's very similar to that. So, but either way, so this is the second game in the series that features a transsexual character. And like I said, this is by far the best Resident Evil light gun game. It's fucking great. The storyline is goofy and stupid. The gameplay is actually really fucking fun. So it's third person and it's really one of the first Resident Evil games that doesn't have a fixed camera, like control the camera. But when you actually aim, it goes into first person. And even on controller, the aiming controls are really fucking solid for this time frame. So it's unfortunate this game was kind of a dud when it came to, you know, sales and stuff. I actually have it, of course, in the PS2 as I do basically all these games that I'm going to talk about here. And I remember at the time when I bought it, it was another one of those games that was kind of one of those like dollar bin games, but is now once again a bit of a holy grail in the PS2. So like I could probably get $100 for that game fucking now. But at the same time, I think I got it for like $10 back in the day or something. I got it for basically nothing, but it's still really fucking solid. And the next games here are the two Outbreak games. Now this is also a very revolutionary series of games. I have once again these on the PS2 and these were always holy grails, especially Outbreak File 2.
By this point, I was pretty checked out of Resident Evil up until what's upcoming. But people online love Outbreak, as I recall. There was a mega thread on Something Awful about it that was prolific.
Oh, absolutely. They're very innovative. This is really the first Resident Evil game that tried to do online. Like this was when online gaming, especially on console, was like super niche. Outside of like Xbox, like Halo and like early Call of Duty games and stuff like that. I'm talking about like anything other than first person shooters. Like this was extremely revolutionary. Like, and obviously those servers are long since dead. Like they were dead like fucking 20 years ago, 15 years ago. But at the same time, like from the footage that I've seen, like this shit was really innovative. I think there were voice commands, if I'm not mistaken, or something along those lines. Like there were ways you could telegraph through like character movements and like dialogue and stuff that other characters who were playing from, you know, across the world could communicate to you. Like this shit was really interesting. Now, I never actually beat these Resident Evil games. This is actually the first Resident Evil game, especially these first two, that I have very little history actually playing of. Like I have physical copies of, but they're really hard to play, obviously, because they were meant to be played as co-op. And if you can't play them at co-op, then you're not really playing them, if that makes sense.
Just dual wielding controllers.
Oh, absolutely. Like it's functionally very difficult to play these games without online support. But at the same time, they're cool to have. You know, you still can play a little bit of them. You can still basically beat them. But I've never actually done that, but I've seen Let's Plays of them. And yeah, absolutely fantastic. Like it's basically the story is there's different scenarios that take place during the fall of Raccoon City. And you get to play as other survivors, including, you know, those characters like there's a teenage girl, there's a news reporter, there's a cop who's like very clearly like another Leon Kennedy knockoff. There's like a black guy who I think is like a janitor or something. And you basically have to once again survive various Resident Evil encounters, including one at like a zoo.
Is he really a janitor?
I think he's a janitor, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe a janitor or like an office worker or something along like a blue collar / gray collar worker, I think. I could be wrong.
Okay.
But either way, you play as multiple various quasi NPC like characters, but you get to play them and they have, you know, more of a backstory than that, including the news reporter is actually the mother of one of the two main characters in Resident Evil Requiem, which is the most recent Resident Evil entry in the series that I've not played yet, to be very clear. I'm waiting for that one to go on sale, like significantly on sale, because it's actually on sale right now as recording, but it's not on sale enough for me to want to buy it yet. But either way, that character, I can't remember their name at the moment, but their mother is a character in the Resident Evil Outbreak games. And like I said, it is, as much as I've played it, it's very interesting, it's very unique. And like I said, there's various scenarios, like one of them you have to survive like going to the Resident Evil Zoo, and there's various like giant Resident Evil Zoo monsters, including a giant infected elephant that you have to kill.
I've
there's
seen
like
some of that footage. That's so awesome.
Yeah, there's like a Resident Evil axe murderer that's like another stalker enemy like Nemesis. You know, he looks like an executioner with a hood and shit, and he's like a serial killer or something. And there's like other things too. There's like another like, not Nemesis, but tyrant-like character that chases you, and that's like a stalker enemy once again. It's very interesting. And like, even though this game is another game that sold very poorly, but it is definitely one of those innovator games, and I'm very much glad it exists. And you said you've seen some of this footage, right? And you said you were fascinated by it when you first saw it?
Yeah, particularly the zoo footage. I remember people talking about that and looking that up years ago. I'm a sucker for like creatures. I love a creature. And my favorite thing about the Resident Evil games has always been, and this is true for a lot of people, not zombies, but the creatures. Giant leeches, or like the stalkers, which are kind of zombies, but they're a different type of humanoid. The elephant is awesome. I remember even at the time thinking like, oh, this is almost like stepped away from Resident Evil. By this point, I was kind of stepping away from video games overall, already pivoting towards other things. But I remember thinking like, this is like expanding the horizon of what is possible. The concept of Resident Evil, the core concept, is so good, so simple. There's so much you can do with it. And I remember thinking like, oh, they're starting to really broaden what they can do within the scope of this series. Later on in the decade, we'd see them continue to do that. But it seems to be the start of that. The start of like expanding what the Umbrella Corporation is capable of beyond just zombie overrun city.
Oh, absolutely 100%. And like I said, it is just so fucking cool to see the Capcom team finally branch out more of the scenarios. Because obviously in, the original games, we only got to see Raccoon City from, Leon Kennedy, Claire Redfield, and fucking Jill's and Carlos kind of perspective. You know what I mean? Like, we didn't really get to see other people because, like, clearly more people survived the Raccoon City outbreak than just 4 people. You know what I mean? Like, there are clearly other survivors. Not that many, but clearly some. So you want to see what they're fucking up to as well. So really cool shit to see. And like I said, I'm glad they exist. And I think there's ways you can emulate it online. Like, I've seen people be able to play it online through emulation. Because nowadays, of course, there's just so many ways to emulate fucking past games that would have been inconceivable even 10 years ago. So people have been able to do that now with Outbreak. And I have both physical copies, so I should be able to do that pretty easily. And maybe one of these days when I have the time and I can figure it out, I'll do that. Because I've emulated games on my PC with like a disk drive and stuff and just play the emulator with it. It usually plays a little bit smoother with the disk than it does with like a emulation file. So maybe I'll do it that way. Who the fuck knows? But either way. So yeah, that is Outbreak File 1 and 2. And then finally, the grand motherfucking daddy of them all, Resident Evil 4. Now, this came out in 2005. This is the last game we're going to talk about because it's 2005. And I want to be clear, this is my favorite game of all time, the original Resident Evil 4. I've been playing this game for 20 fucking years. I've figured out everything that this game has to offer. I figured out every glitch. I play this game with mods. I play this game regular. I have like 10 different versions of this game. Like, I am in fucking love with this game. It is an absolute 10 out of 10 classic game.
So, of its era, this is a definitive game. I mean, just in general, for me, when this game came out, I remember I spoke on our previous RE episode. I loved Resident Evil 2 and 3. I played that a lot as a kid. Kind of stepped away from the series. Didn't really keep up. I was playing RPGs. I was playing some of those like hard platformers that I was getting into. I started going back to like harder retro games. At the time, retro games. RE4 comes out. I go over to my friend Aaron's house and he's just gotten it. And we're watching this and I'm going, this isn't like any other Resident Evil game. It's got all the core necessary components of a classic Resident Evil game with the mechanics of it, the pace of it, the world of it. It's so much more extreme, so much more high octane that you'd be hard pressed to be a core Resident Evil fan and not love this game, but you could be someone that had no interest in the previous games, no interest in the tank controls, no interest in survival horror, and this would be like a perfect video game for you. This is probably the best Resident Evil game in my opinion. Like, it is the best. It's probably my favorite. It's certainly the one that I played the most recently. It is also marks the moment when I recognized that this series was shifting fundamentally into a type of game that I probably was going to lose interest in. But for this brief moment in between like classic Resident Evil and post RE4, this is a perfect game. It's a perfect just action game. It is still a survival horror game. It's still creepy. It's still tense. I mean, this game was revelatory when it came out.
No, absolutely. I couldn't fucking agree more. And this is also the last game that Shinji Mikami directed. He very infamously said if this game is ported outside of the GameCube that he would cut his own head off, which is hilarious because this game, since its release, except for the original Xbox, it has been released on some level, including its remake, on every single game console since its launch. So it's been released, including the remake, on like 15 fucking consoles. It's hilarious how many fucking consoles this game's been released on. Now, once again, the original GameCube version is the original version I played. I have, let me see here, I have the GameCube version, I have the Wii version, I had the Xbox 360 version on digital, I have PS4, I have the original PS2 version, which is the worst version, but I have, let me see here, and I think those are all the versions I have, but I have like, oh, I also have the demo disc, of course, so I have have like 7 versions of this fucking game, and I've beaten them all many, many times. Oh, and the PC version. Of course, I have the PC version. I actually have both PC versions, the original really shitty Ubisoft port and the fantastic HD edition. And, once again, this is a fantastic game. The storyline is also the best of the Resident Evil series so far, because, you play as Leon Kennedy, once again, resuming his role in the mainline series since Resident Evil 2. It takes place in an unnamed European village, but clearly it's Spain. Even though they all speak in Mexican Spanish, it's in Spain. And the remake fixed that. They speak like Castilian Spanish, but in this game, they speak Mexican Spanish, which is very funny. And it takes place in a village, a castle, once again, a very gothic castle. I wouldn't quite say like Victorian, but very gothic castle. And then an island. And you have to save the president's daughter, who's been kidnapped by the evil Los Illuminados, who is led by Osman Sadler and his, various villagers and cronies, including Salazar and by Torres Mendez. And, the game is very fucking long. Like, the first playthrough, if you beat it under like 10 hours, you're like a miracle worker. Because, like, yeah. I remember playing this game, I probably beat it in like fucking 20 hours. Like, the game is so long. It's so fucking significant. In fact, it comes on 2 discs, as many as the early Resident Evil games did, especially on the GameCube with the remake, and Resident Evil 0 also came on 2 discs, but this game also comes on 2 discs. And it is, just a fucking phenomenal game. It's endlessly replayable. It's so well paced with the weapon releases, and all the weapons do different things. Even handguns have various powers and stuff. You can upgrade them in any kind of way you want. There's a fantastic progression system when it comes to upgrading those weapons. It has a great amount of resource allocation. It gives you the attaché case, which is still one of the best ways to ever like itemize your weapon and item collection in any video game ever. It's fucking phenomenal. It is very fair with its giving you of in-game currency, the peseta. It is just fucking great. It is perfect in nearly every single way. It's still a 10 out of 10.
One of the best and most satisfying difficulty curves in any game I've ever played.
Yes, and on top of that too, it actually has dynamic difficulty. So if you're playing the game and you die 10 times, the game will get easier. And that's only in the normal mode. On professional, the gameplay is the same no matter how many times you get hurt or die. But on normal and easy, which there is an easy mode on the original PC and the HD collection version, but otherwise the game only has 2 difficulty settings. But they're both perfectly fair, because one of them, once again, has dynamic and the other doesn't have dynamic. So if you want the game to get slightly easier, do that one. But if you want the game to just stay the same difficulty and you just power through it, that's professional. So it's fair. And easy mode only changes a few minor things. It gives you a few more leniency when it comes to item allocation. It gives you the shotgun right away. But other than that, it's basically the same. It's very little difference between the easy mode and normal mode, but there are very minor differences.
What you see with Resident Evil 4, I think, pretty much all positive changes, or I don't even want to say changes. There are changes. There's also just natural evolutions, but a lot of what you see is you've got this very solid franchise. Of course, we just went over some lesser installments in the series, but the core Resident Evil, those first 3 games, that foundation, that kind of the survival horror tone that Resident Evil was the first game to perfect. Resident Evil 4 kind of is like a response to this question of, what if we made this like an action movie? Like, is it possible to take this survival horror, wounded atmosphere and meld it with like a high octane, like almost like an 80s action movie level of speed and excitement? And even the scope of the storyline, that the president's daughter has been kidnapped by a rural nation state-sized cult. The scope has now moved, obviously it's beyond Raccoon City. It's so much more massive, and there's so much more, just the threat of the game is so much more. But at the same time, you have so much more options. It's so much more combative. And I think that's why I saw people playing this game who I don't think ever played a survival horror game, never would have played Resident Evil, certainly wouldn't have played Silent Hill, playing this game religiously, because it's so satisfying and it's so exciting.
No, absolutely. I mean, this was my very first Resident Evil game in like 2006, and I've been addicted ever since. And, like I said, this game is just paced so well. All the enemies are just so much fucking fun to fight. All the mini bosses are so much fun to fucking fight, even if obviously there's a little bit of frustration here and there with like one-hit death bullshit every now and again. And, this is also one of the few games to do quick time events pretty well for the most part. Like, there's almost no quick time events where I'm like, oh, fuck that, you fucking assholes. Like, there's almost none of those.
Quick time.
Absolutely. And another fun fact, this is the last game that was released as part of the Capcom 5. One of the last games, I should say, the second to last game. Now, what's hilarious is that they call it the Capcom 5, but there were only 4 games ever released. But the Capcom 5 was a series of video games that were exclusively made for the GameCube by Capcom. They had a exclusive deal with Nintendo. And there was Piano 3, which is the only game I haven't played, and it looks fine. Very mediocre. Next one's Beautiful Joe, which Beautiful Joe 1 and 2 are fucking phenomenal video games. Have you ever played Beautiful Joe, Brian?
Yeah, I love Beautiful Joe. That is a perfect example of Capcom as one of the all-time all-time great studios, at least at this time, firing on all cylinders. Just creative, satisfying, aesthetically interesting. Love it.
No, absolutely. The next one was Dead Phoenix, which never got released, unfortunately, although the footage looked interesting. And then, of course, this game. And then lastly, of course, very famously, both Brian and I love, Killer 7 was the final game released as part of the Capcom 5, which is hilarious that all of these games, except for PNO3, got ported to the PS2 and other consoles later, which is very funny. This was an exclusivity deal. And the worst one got stuck on GameCube and the others didn't. So that's very fucking funny. But either way, yeah, this is just a fucking phenomenal game. It takes forever to beat in a good way. It's just filled with, once again, great set pieces, great boss fights, great fucking combat, great dialogue, very iconic characters and levels and everything fucking else. It's really the perfect Resident Evil game to me. And I will say a lot of people have tried to say that this game is now obsolete with the Resident Evil 4 remake. I don't agree with that. I think this game is still just as amazing as it came out. Now, granted, is it a 20-plus-year-old game? Sure. This is just like with most remakes, including video games, as I said, there's still a utility in going back to this game and seeing why people loved it in the fucking first place. Like, this game should not be replaced by the original. It just shouldn't. The remake is very much an accessory to this game, and that's how I feel about it. Because the remake is still a fucking great game, and we will get into the remake on a later episode. It is fucking great, but this game very much stands alone as its own thing. It just does.
And I know that we're going to get into it in a future episode. I do just wrap this up. I am of the opinion, I tried to play just a little bit of Resident Evil 5, did not like it. Looked at some gameplay from RE6, did not like it. And my feeling has been, as someone who hasn't really spent time with those games, I don't think that the series knew where to go from Resident Evil 4. I think that 4, first of all, in some ways it progressed and it broke away from this series, what it was up to that point, so drastically, and it was so successful that I kind of think they don't know what to do. My feeling on Resident Evil 5 was like, oh, they're kind of trying to like up the ante on RE4 and make it even more like they're trying to continue it being this fast-paced action. And my feeling at the time, and kind of still, is that that was a mistake. That it would be better to treat Resident Evil 4 as an outlier, as a derivation from the series that is extremely different, and to continue developing the series as like a paced survival horror series. But it seems like what they at least did for the couple installments after was chase the ghost of Resident Evil 4, which I just don't think was ever in the cards. They really did capture lightning in a bottle with this game.
So, I'll just leave this as a capstone for our next episode when we cover more Resident Evil games. I really liked Resident Evil 5. Like, I do think it has its problems, but I do think it generally does a pretty good job of progressing the series. But Resident Evil 6 is just total fucking trash. It's awful. Like, it's just really bad. It's the worst numbered entry in the Resident Evil franchise by far. Because even though I haven't played Requiem yet, I did play the demo, and the demo is fucking great. I wouldn't say it's my favorite, obviously, but Resident Evil Requiem, the demo that I played so far, is really fucking good. So, yeah, Resident Evil 6 is by far the worst numbered Resident Evil game. But either way, so yeah, that will be the end of our 2000-2005 Resident Evil retrospective. Brian, do you have any final thoughts before we get to our pluggables?
So, my final thoughts on this, the only game in this era that I've spent a lot of time with is Resident Evil 4. I think what's interesting looking at here is you're kind of seeing a series that up to this point has been very successful, and they're kind of going through some growing pains, right? They're trying a few different things. They're trying a few Victorian setting of Veronica, they're trying the light guns, they're trying kind of different ways to progress the series forward. And typically, I think, to be honest, as much as I love experimentalism, when a beloved and established franchise in video games breaks drastically with its previous format, it usually doesn't work. But I think that they've gone through so much trial and error, they've seen so many other things happen to Resident Evil in this period, and they're kind of still looking for what's the new identity of the series going to be, so that it's not just rehashing, Nemesis, which I would say up to 4 is like the last drastic contribution to both the gameplay and the lore. And it takes a few years, but when you get to Resident Evil 4, I think you see every lesson that the series have learned up to this point. If you're going to play one Resident Evil game, and I wouldn't even necessarily say it's my personal favorite, but if you're only going to play one, you should play Resident Evil 4. It is so satisfying. And again, if you like video games at all, you are going to enjoy that game. If you like survival horror, if there's RPG elements, which there actually are in all RE games, it's interesting seeing this series that I don't want to say they were floundering up to that point, but they're trying a few different things, throwing things to the wall and seeing what sticks. For them to hit on something like Resident Evil 4, which didn't just change the series, but really did kind of change action games in that era, and you could see it almost instantaneously, is pretty remarkable.
No, absolutely. And like for me, my final thoughts are, even though there obviously are some very mediocre and frankly bad games in this era, and it very much is a franchise trying to mature past its, 90s highs. Obviously, this franchise very much hit its peaks, but also very much its lows lows in this era, and its peaks are so high and its lows are very fucking low. So it's interesting to see both of those things in this era. And yeah, Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil Remake are for sure the games that if you want to really get into this franchise, you should play. I would say that if you're a very casual gamer, the Resident Evil remakes are just really great games to get into, because the original Resident Evil trilogy are great games. I have Resident Evil 2 and 3, the original, on both the GameCube and now the PC. I just bought that as part of a sale recently. And the original Resident Evil I also bought on PC, and I have on the DS with Resident Evil Deadly Silence, which is a game we will cover, I believe, on the next episode. But either way, like, those games are very much a product of their time, whereas I think Resident Evil Remake and Resident Evil 4 still very much do hold up as like modern video games in a way that those games don't. And I think those games are very interesting to play. I think you should play them, and also very much check out Let's Plays, and even if you can find them for very cheap, which you're not going to be able to just knowing the way that video game collecting is these days, but if you can find these games cheap or find Let's Plays of them, watch the other games that we, looked at outside of Resident Evil Remake 0 and 4. Like, there's many great elements, especially of Outbreak and Dead Aim, which are very interesting games. Now, once again, Survivor 2, Code Veronica, and Gun Survivor, of course, just watch LPs of those, and like I said, if you're at Galloping Ghost Arcade in Brookfield, Illinois, you can play Gun Survivor 2, but don't expect much of it. And Resident Evil Gaiden is just a game that is just best forgotten. I'm just being honest. It's just called Resident Evil Forgotten. It's a bad game. It's a very bad game and not worth even revisiting on an interesting, like, historical level. It's just an awful game. It's the worst of these games, in my opinion.
Calling back to our previous episode, when you talk about, like, the classic era of Let's Plays, by the way, if anyone listened to that last episode, that really is the optimal use of the classic Let's Play format, is to learn about a game that is interesting or is historically important, but that you really don't want to spend time playing. So if you're thinking, like, why would anyone watch a Let's Play? This ties back into that. A game like that is the perfect example, because it's a game that you probably need to know about if you want to get really into Resident Evil. You probably want some context for it, but you don't want to waste time playing it.
No, I couldn't fucking agree more. So that will be our retrospective on the Resident Evil franchise. So let's get into our pluggables. So you can follow me at Carlos Chantor on Twitter.com. And as well, please subscribe and follow us on both our YouTube and our Spotify channel, where we are uploading every episode simultaneously at both platforms. And as well, as I've been saying now for probably the last 10-15 episodes, I have personal finance social media channels. So I have a TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram channel. I will be posting short form content on both Instagram and TikTok one of these days, as well as long form content on YouTube in the next millennium, I would say. But either way, I will get on that content eventually, and that will detail various ways you can budget, from the practical to some of the bit more in-depth stuff, and it will always be non-reactionary content, as I said. I have some very interesting things listed as potential video and short form content stuff that I will do eventually, but once again, it is very much a work in progress. It's not like doing a podcast, which is very easy to do. Setting up tripods and scripts and everything can be a little bit more difficult. So, once again, be patient on that, but one of these days I will release content for that. And, I put the links for all of those social medias in the description, so please follow and subscribe to them whenever I get the chance to finally make content for that. But I'm very excited because personal finance is a very, very important thing to me. And as well, I want to make something that's non-fascist, which basically doesn't exist when it comes to personal finance on the internet. It is a very, very right-wing genre of video content, and I want to change that just ever so slightly if I can, because I feel like there is actually a market for that, if I'm being honest.
Oh, no, absolutely. There's absolutely a market, not just for, like, I think sustainability and good, effective, ethical living for just normal working people, but I think that there's even, I think one of the things is that since the onset of the Cold War, the right has really they've laid claim to the concept of, like, growth, of, like, economic stability. And that's historically not really the way that it is, either in practice or ideologically. That's the way we were kind of oriented to think about it in America. But there is, like, a tradition of, like, kind of left-leaning thought about growth and abundance and moderation and things beyond just, like, money bad or whatever.
No, absolutely. And, as we always say, to talk about money bad, but money good, is that on my Patreon, because I also have a Patreon, I'll link in, future episodes, I think. But if we get to $10,000 a month, we will get Brian to drive a Bugatti through the streets of Portland and upload that as video content. And we're kind of being serious on that. We might actually do that, because $10,000 a month is a crazy amount of money to make on the internet.
I have no intention of ever buying and owning a car, but I'll tell you what, we do that, Taylor will give me driving lessons.
With a manual Bugatti, because I don't know how to drive manual either, so it'll be quite hilarious content.
Oh my god, this is stressing me out.
Thankfully, it'll never happen. Well, fingers crossed, but thankfully it'll never happen, but we'll see. Speaking of things that will happen very soon, soon because they're very much in the process of creating it. But Lucifer and the Father campaign, of course, our good friend Scott Sean Robert are creating a fantastic series. Last time we talked about it, they are finishing up post-production of episodes 2 and 3 of Lucifer and the Father. So we're very excited to see where that goes. And we're finally, of course, we're very interested in watching it because, of course, we believe in Scott Sean Robert. They're creating this fantastic series, otherwise known once again as Lucifer and the Father. And, just as like we say with everything else, if you donate to the campaign, just send us an email, send us a YouTube comment, and we will, within good reason, about 10, 15, 20 bucks, match those donations because we want Scott Sean Robert's dreams to become a reality. And do you have any updates since that last update, Brian, or anything new?
They are essentially done with post-production. Like, final editing is just about done. Just to reiterate for listeners, they've been working this whole time. We always talk about how hard it is for independent artists, anyone trying to make an independent, ambitious product outside of the Hollywood system. Part of that is that Sean and Scott, they're both, adults. They both have many obligations. They have day jobs. They have people in their lives they need to take care of. And so part of the support we're giving them is for them to realize this really ambitious and high concept series while still being able to live their lives. If it seems like it's been taking a while, just keep in mind that that's why we're supporting them, because this is the reality of being an independent artist.
No, absolutely. It's very much a work in progress. And obviously, as we, just mentioned about an ambitious project, but this time an ambitious project of freedom. Of course, Luigi Mangione and his defense fund. Now, thankfully, as of recording today, so the update that we had about Luigi last week, which is going to come out on the episode that's coming out, I think on July 9th. So it's already going to be out of date. But apparently the mental health defense is being scrapped, apparently. And thank fucking God, because what an awful idea that was. And there was also talk about an alleged plea deal, but from what I understand, that is misinformation by the prosecutors. So that's not going through. So this will be going to trial. I believe the federal trial is starting in September, they said, and the state trial will be happening at the tail end of the year. So we'll see where that goes. And of course, this will be a very complicated trial. But once again, of course, we believe in Luigi. At this point, we believe in his defense team because they dropped that horrible idea. So they're back mostly in our good graces again. So we'll see. But either way, Luigi still needs our moral and financial support to hopefully get his freedom. Now, once again, of course, Luigi didn't do it. He's completely innocent of all charges. And, if you want to donate to his campaign, just send us a YouTube comment, send us an email about 10, 15, 20 bucks. We will match those donations because we want Luigi to have the best possible trial. And once again, within the next coming 2-3 months to the end of the year, it will be very interesting. And we're really hoping for the best. And we will continue to update you every single episode. Right, Brian?
Yeah, absolutely. Regarding Luigi, I don't know what to make of this at this point. The fact that they even considered the insanity plea or mental wellness plea and then scrapped it immediately has got me a bit nervous, but I have to have confidence. The team's done great for him so far, so I have to, maintain some level of confidence that they know what they're doing. They wouldn't steer him wrong. I mean, obviously, a lot of people sent them a lot of money, including Taylor and I, because we have confidence that they can take care of Luigi.
No, absolutely. And, even with the, fake plea deal disinfo thing, that is also a great sign that they're disinfoing that, because that means they're desperate. They're desperate to make something happen. So that is great fucking news on top of it. But yeah, I mean, even with that misstep aside, I still think things are going in a fairly good direction. And, speaking of people whose lives are going in a fairly good direction, of course, we have our own Patreon page. Now, at the moment, we don't have any patrons, but become a patron of ours today. We have many great tiers, including the $5 tier, which is where you get every episode 48 hours early, because we always say the first 48 hours are the most important. When you're talking to your normie coworker and they're talking about video games and you say, oh yeah, some of my favorite video games are the Resident Evil games released from the years 2000, 2005. And they'll be like, oh my God, yeah, my favorite is Resident Evil Gaiden. Oh my God, have you played Resident Evil 2 Gun Survivor? And they'll be like, how'd you play Resident Evil 2 Gun Survivor? Did you play it at the Galloping Ghost Arcade in Brookfield, Illinois? And they're like, no.
Yeah, they'll call you out. They'll be like, get a load of this guy.
Yeah, they'll be like, Galloping Ghost? What the fuck? A ghost can't gallop? What the fuck are you talking about? I saw it on YouTube. PewDiePie was playing it, and every time he shot a barrel, he called it a barrel and said he was going to rape it. Remember how cool that was? Yeah, you'll be like, yeah, I'm so glad I talked to you about video games. I totally forgot that I shouldn't talk to coworkers in the break room.
This coworker is an old millennial, so we gotta respect him.
No, absolutely. But either way, even with that failed conversation, once again, with your very weird coworker, you will still get 48 hours of early content from this podcast to listen to and get that awkward conversation ready, which seems to happen every week at the same smelly break room at your call center job for some reason.
You gotta have the newest episode of Millennials Are Old loaded up, ready to go, can deflect anything your coworker says. You can impress them by, again, talking about niche Resident Evil games. You tell them about how, even if you're a Zoomer, tell them about how you remember when RE4 dropped and how it revolutionized gameplay. That everyone's gonna be like, wow, that's so cool. And they won't even know that you're stealing that opinion from the podcast.
No, absolutely. And I do love in this scenario that every single like weird coworker that we have is like, yeah, a fucking divorced dad creepypasta guy who's super misogynist and only likes the weirdest Resident Evil games, but he also works at a call center making like $9 an hour. But either way, people whose lives are like a movie. Brian, do you have any pluggables as well?
You can follow my personal Instagram and Threads at JLo Biafra. You can also follow us, the show, at Millennials Are Old Pod at Instagram and Threads. That remains the best, most consistent, and quickest way to reach out to me regarding the show. If you want to give us feedback, suggestions, guest ideas, if you want to do a Gamergate on me, if you want to dox me, if you would like to form a really strong parasocial relationship with me, really would prefer you don't, but there's nothing I can do about it. But in any case, the best ways to reach out to me there are Millennials Are Old Pod, Instagram and Threads. You can also find us at the Facebook page, Millennials Are Old. In addition to tailoring your budget, I'm starting up just a text-based blog that's going to kind of work. It's going to be independent from the podcast, but it'll touch on a lot of the same specific subjects. So there will be certain installments where I'm doing expanded deep dives or more analytical kind of looks at subjects we've done. Not replace the show, but an addendum to it, I suppose. And I'll be doing a lot of stuff like that. I think I'm going to do a medium just because I get a bad taste in my mouth from Substack. Also, regarding the Patreon, I mean, like, we've always said we're not ever going to make exclusive content, and we won't. But speaking for myself, if we get Patreon subscribers, there is more incentive because Taylor and I have talked about doing streams and doing other ancillary content, which we'd love to do. But I think it's hard for both of us to justify carving out the time to do that at this point. But rest assured, that is on the docket. And we're going to do it regardless. But any sort of Patreon subscriptions, any donations, or anything that you did want to give them to Luigi Mangioni's Legal Defense Fund or to Sean Scott and Robert for Lucifer the Father first. But if you wanted to donate to the Patreon, that certainly would help in giving us incentive and reason and a little bit of resource to pursue broader projects.
No, absolutely. And you're totally right. We will never lock content away, but obviously giving us money to help support us will make us more likely to do more things for you and also give it earlier, to be very clear, as we talk about the 48-hour tier. And we'll do that with our streams too, to be very, very clear, because sometimes obviously you want to do a stream, but just like with the early history of Let's Plays, you don't want to have fucking an hour of setup beforehand before the fucking stream comes out, because that shit's boring. It just takes up fucking room in a data center that's slowly fucking draining the water out of your local community. And you don't want that shit, do you?
Yeah. Watch out for those data centers when they pop up in your neighborhood, guys.
No, absolutely. And speaking of evil corporations that want to suck the lifeblood out of us, that will be the end of our Resident Evil 2000 to 2005 retrospective. And speaking of, Brian, I am a resident in my house that is evil. And to help get rid of the evil, I'm going to go fall asleep in my bed. Do you think that's a good idea?
I am hoping to get at least Resident Evil 4 hours of sleep, the optimal number, but it's most likely that I will get Resident Evil 2 hours of sleep. Less satisfying.
I thought you were going to say, Brian, I'm going to be a survivor in my sleep, but I won't need my gun.
There you go. That's why I keep you around, Taylor.
So have a good night, everybody. Sleep tight, and don't let Tyrant, including the transsexual ones, bite. So have a good night, everybody.